So, I'm pretty new to the editing game, so I just want to apologize for the fact that this video won't be that visually interesting. Fortunately for me, I can talk well, so here we go. Last year, we finally got to see the live-action, big-screen version of the Justice League. It was kind of a mess, but a nicer, better-smelling mess than the messes that we've had before. Since Man of Steel came out in 2013, DC and Warner Brothers have been playing catch-up to capture that same lightning in a bottle that is currently earning Marvel and Disney all of the cash money. As things stand right now, the DCEU is floundering, and we're going to go over why. First things first, at the end of the day, it's about the money, both earning it and being able to manage it. The section of Warner Brothers that handles the DCEU does not know how to properly manage their money, which sounds ridiculous because this is not the first franchise they've handled. They know how to make their money. But let's look at the budget for each of their films for the moment. Man of Steel at $225,000, Batman v Superman at $250,000, Suicide Squad at $175,000, Wonder Woman at $150,000, and Justice League at $300,000. Now, let's look at the MCU films. The Avengers movie, the first one, had a budget of $225,000. Age of Ultron had $330,000, with the origin movies averaging about $155,000 per movie, and their sequels averaging a little higher than that at $190,000 per movie. Which means just coming out of the gate, DC is losing money. Obviously, I don't work for WB, so I can't say for sure how they're spending their money, but I can say for sure that this is a bad sign. This isn't Avatar we're talking about. The effects and the scenery and the costuming in these movies aren't so spectacular that it would justify spending this kind of money on it, especially when the DCEU is just starting out. And half of the time, these visual effects are mediocre. I think Justice League was probably the worst about this. I'm not even talking about the mustache thing. I mean, that my first impression of this movie is that it looked like a video game cutscene. It looked unreal, which is a bad sign considering that it is, for the most part, taking place in the real world, not on some other planet or dimension. Not to mention Cyborg's body, the torso of which looked unnaturally thin to the point of being unstable. Like someone, multiple someones, saw that and still let it go through. That's nonsense. I'm pretty sure they could have made an actual costume with fabric that looked better than that if they had to forgo CGI, or just use Jon Stewart's Green Lantern. Either one. The fact that the movie that they expected to earn the least out of and gave the lowest budget to, Wonder Woman, still managed to earn the highest domestically and the second highest worldwide after Batman and v Superman, as well as being a critical success, says a lot about the concept less is more. If Deadpool has taught us anything, it's that you can do a lot with a small budget, with passion, and shit tons of creativity. Which brings me to my next point, the directors. The nicest thing I can say for the director that WB chose, with the exception of Patty Jenkins, was that they are not right for the roles they were given. Regardless of how much they loved or didn't love the characters, they don't actually seem to understand them. More than that, they don't really understand how to use them properly. I'm going to go ahead and make the blanket statement that pretty much everything I'm about to say from this point on doesn't really have much to do with Wonder Woman. Patty Jenkins is a treasure, and she can get her shit done just fine. Now, here's the thing. The DC movies in this current cinematic universe are basically plot-driven. That is to say that the director or studio or whoever decided that X, Y, and Z need to happen in the movie, and then from there they have to figure out how to get the characters to go that way, even if it requires them to act in a way that is inconsistent or downright nonsensical, aka the entire stream of nonsense that is the titular Batman vs Superman fight. And because the entire movie are plot driven and the characters just do whatever they need to do in order to bring the plot forward, it makes understanding them as people harder than it should be. Worse yet, in addition to being plot driven, the plots in each movie are driven by the directors or the writers for that individual movie. than a cohesive idea for the plot of the franchise as a whole. They are quick to change direction, completely dropping plot points that were meant to be foreshadowing for something big by the time the next movie comes in. Much like the comics in the beginning, Man of Steel functioned as if it was separate from the idea of other superheroes. Gotham and Metropolis are apparently really close to one another, because especially in this universe, they're supposed to be very close to one another. But the idea that other vigilantes existed in this world prior to or just after Superman seems unlikely based on that movie. But come Batman v Superman, we have a Batman that has been active for decades, with all the adventures that come with it, and it feels off. It feels off that there are apparently other metahumans in this world besides Superman before the Daily Planet even knew how strong he was, but he was treated as something that was new and unusual and weird. It feels off that Barry Allen was off running around and doing whatever the hell he's been doing, and Batman isn't even remotely concerned about it. It feels off that Lex fucking Luthor is the one that figured out all these people and their histories with no build-up, and the world's greatest detective didn't even have a clue. But whatever, moving on. The DCEU also has a tone/palette issue. This is not just superhero movies should be dark and gritty. They need to be light and fun like Marvel. No. It's a matter of breathing room and preventing darkness-induced audience apathy. If you've never been on ptvtropes.org, I definitely recommend it if you have nothing to do and want to spend the next 14 hours on your computer with 19 tabs open. It's fun. But darkness-induced audience apathy is what happens when people watch a movie that is consistently dark or consistently bleak. If the movie is shaded dark, there are going to be a lot of people who have some form of difficulty actually seeing what's going on or following the movie. And after a while, they will, intentionally or otherwise, start to mentally check out. Because trying to pay attention to something that you can't understand fully is an exercise in frustration and not really a fun pastime. When the movie is too bleak, the audience starts to get depressed. As it is, life is already depressing as hell, and if you already know things aren't going to get better, it's just added stress. Now, the movie doesn't need to be hopeful, but it does need to have hope spots. At some point in the movie, throughout the movie, the audience needs to be able to relax. Stress, relax. Stress, relax. Stress, 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 relax, etc. It doesn't have to be jokes. It just needs to be periods of downtime from whatever it is that's causing the stress. Jokes are just a very common form of that. Scenes where characters are sitting around in a more or less good mood and talking calmly to one another is another way of doing that. Because you can only maintain a certain level of stress for a small period of time. After a while, even if the situation is still stressful, the body has already used up its adrenaline and you just feel drained. And when people say that they leave these movies feeling depressed, that's what they're talking about. And really, the color palette is what kills it. You can have a movie that's dark in tone and serious and still have decent lighting and color. They're not opposites and don't have to detract from one another if used properly. You need to mix it up. Because if the movie is dark in tone and dark visually, the audience will reach that apathy point much faster than they would have if it was just one or the other. You need to have some breathing room. But at the end of the day, there are pretty much 4 reasons why someone follows a series or franchise after that initial movie. Number 1 is that they're invested in the plot. Basically, the next movie has a strong premise, which was built upon or foreshadowed. Like I said before, DCEU has shown itself quick to drop plot points based on how the public is currently feeling, and the plots brought out thus far have been either kind of generic, like the Justice League, or kind of convoluted, like Batman v Superman. So that's a no-go. Number 2 is that the people are invested in the world that's been created. That's what got people in the theaters for Star Wars The Force Awakens. All people had to hear was that a Star Wars movie was coming out and half the audience was ready to go, even if the characters that they had known and grown up with wouldn't be the stars of the franchise anymore. The world that DC has created in these movies is not that special. The fact that you can't even tell when the movie has moved from Metropolis to Gotham, two historically diametrically opposite cities, as different as night as day, says a lot about how dully consistent everything is. Number 3 is the action or spectacle offered. This is my favorite one, guys. There is nothing I love more than good action choreography. I wanted to start fanning myself during that church scene in Kingsman, okay? That shit was amazing. And if you have not seen it, you need to pause this video and go watch it right now because I found God. You do not even know. Anyway, the fights in the DCEU have been good, in that I haven't found them to be actively wanting, and I more or less enjoyed them at the time. I found the fights in Man of Steel to be actually really good, and the fight between Superman versus the other members of the League was fun outside of everyone seeming kind of unusually weak in comparison to him. Unfortunately, those two were the highlights. The other ones weren't good enough on their own to hold the movie up, and there isn't enough other random acts of spectacle in these movies to account for it. Even the Transformer movies are good enough at that alone to still make bank at the box office, even with little to no plot the sequels have had. And number 4, the big one, is because the audience is invested in the characters. This one in particular is Marvel's greatest strength. The MCU is primarily founded on the strength of its characters. We want to see what they will do. We want to see what they will go through. We are watching the movie to see them because the strength of their character is strong enough to elevate an otherwise okay movie into something really good. With the exception of Wonder Woman and perhaps Harley Quinn, the DCEU has not managed to build their characters up enough as people for the audience to keep coming out based on them alone. They were able to get by initially thanks to brand recognition, the fact that the characters they were making are well known outside of this universe and have been handled well elsewhere, but now they've tainted that brand. Being a DC property is no longer enough to get people excited anymore, because over and over and over again, people have left the theater disappointed. So now, instead of coming out in droves as they did for Batman v Superman, people are saving their money and waiting. Wonder Woman was fortunate enough to have the initial reviews that were amazing, so after that people started really coming out again and again, and then again, because why not? But Justice League's reviews were mixed to poor, and they got lower numbers. And that's not to say that any of the DCEU movies were bombs. They weren't. They made their money back and then some. But this should have been easy money. This isn't Marvel with their B-list leftovers trying to get non-comic book fans invested in characters they've never heard of. This is DC. This is Batman. This is Superman. This is Wonder Woman. These are the characters that pretty much everyone has heard of, even in passing. These characters are the Tom Cruise of comic book heroes. Their name alone should have been enough to get people in those seats. Add to that the fresh, realistic take on DC characters, just like the highly esteemed Nolan movies, and this should have been a slam dunk. That's why people are calling it a failure. Because WB took a brand that was as close to a guarantee as any superhero movie could get, and managed to so thoroughly taint it that the term DCEU is associated with mediocrity. Even worse, they've lost goodwill. If you feel like people are being overly harsh with the DCEU, you're not totally wrong. While the DCEU has fucked up in a lot of different ways over the years, they're also suffering from bitch eating cracker syndrome. You see, eating crackers, even kind of loudly, isn't really something that people are generally annoyed by too much. It'll get you a cringe and some internal eye rolling, but it's not that big a deal. But when a bitch does it, you gotta kind of wonder if they're trying to piss you off. You feel your hands closing into fists and your eyes shutting while you take some deep breaths to calm yourself down. You're about ready to go off. When someone that is doing something well does something stupid, you just tell them not to do it again. It's a one-time thing. They'll get over it. They're more or less okay. They know what they're doing. And when someone that has made a habit of doing stupid shit carries right on with that same pattern, you've already passed the point of being gentle, and you just want them to get their shit together. Finally. And how can DC do that? First and foremost, settling right the fuck down. These people have shown themselves quick to panic and make wide sweeping changes every time the public shifts against them. And while it's good to make changes to better yourself, doing so while panic is the worst thing you can do. They hear the criticism and aren't calm enough to really question what the problem is. So at this point, taking some time to really plan out the franchise itself, possibly with one or two competent producers to keep the directors on track, and then plan out the next movie will help. Next is stepping away from the plot-driven aspect and moving towards a more character-driven movie franchise. That's not just about having individual movies, see Guardians of the Galaxy with their group, but about fleshing out the characters more and moving the world to suit them rather than moving them to suit the world. Patty Jenkins did that with Wonder Woman, making it about her journey and her decisions. With the next set of movies coming out being individual ones, hopefully they'll be able to get on the right track. Which means having good directors. Snyder has stepped away and ideally will stay gone, and hopefully William will too. Although he was able to make changes that did in fact help Justice League and make it better, Whedon is similar to Snyder in that he is a plot-focused director when he is not using his own personal characters that he can do whatever he wants with. There are signs of this type of thing in both the Avengers movies that drag them down from being as good as they could be, specifically him not understanding some of the characters. Which is not to say that they're bad movies, they're not. They're just difficult a little bit, and especially Age of Ultron. That one was pretty difficult to even like for me. He kind of butchered it. Whedon's MCU work could be a whole video in itself, so I'm going to set that aside for now. Last, spending less money on the movies, forcing the staff to work more effectively, and also hiring some better damn editors that could clear up a lot of the excess nitpicky problems we've seen, like the weird cutaways and inconsistencies in the plot. Anyways, thank you for watching. I love talking about this sort of thing, and I could do it forever. So feel free to hit that subscribe button below or leave a comment and chat with me if you'd like to go over something else or if you want me to talk about another topic. This is Cass, signing off.